I never imagined that something as simple as a friendship could evolve the way mine with Liam did. Looking back, I feel like I was a different person at the time. I was 18, still figuring out who I was, working at a corner shop in a small town that never felt like it belonged to me. It was one of those places where everyone knew your name, but no one really saw you. A place where you were just another face passing through the monotonous daily routine. My life wasn't anything special. I didn't have a big circle of friends or a deep sense of belonging. But then there was Liam. He was a regular at the shop, just one of those customers who'd come in for a snack or a drink and make some small talk about the weather. Nothing remarkable at first. He was friendly, yes, but so were half the other people who came in. It wasn't like I thought much of him, just another guy in a sea of everyday faces. But then, after a few months, I noticed him more. He started offering me rides home after my shifts, especially on those nights when I was too tired to make the long walk back to my place. I didn't think much of it. He was just being kind, right? It didn't feel weird or out of place. I was used to walking alone after work. But when he offered, it felt like a small relief. It was like a quiet kindness that I didn't realize I needed until it was there. At the time, I was in a relationship, and I think that kept my world narrow. I wasn't really looking for anything else. My life was set in the patterns of that relationship, and I thought everything was fine even if I sometimes felt like I was just going through the motions. Liam was just a guy who helped make those routines a little easier. He'd stop by for a quick chat or pick up a coffee for me when I didn't have enough change. Little things. I told myself it wasn't anything more than that. I had my boyfriend, and I wasn't looking for distractions. But then my relationship fell apart. It's like those things just happened without warning. You don't even see the cracks forming until it's too late. And when it happened, I was lost. The breakup shook me in ways I hadn't expected. There I was, 19 years old, heartbroken and confused, with everything in my life feeling suddenly fragile and uncertain. And that's when Liam reappeared. It felt like a strange coincidence. One day I was standing at the bus stop waiting for my usual ride home when I saw his car pull up. I hadn't spoken to him in months, but there he was offering me a lift. I didn't even hesitate. I got in, and we started talking as if no time had passed at all. We laughed, reminisced a little, and it felt easy, like slipping into something comfortable after being out in the cold for far too long. And it wasn't just the ride that felt easy, it was the conversation, the way it felt like nothing had changed, even though everything had. From that day on, Liam started showing up more often. He'd stop by randomly sometimes when I was working late or just hanging around. It wasn't anything major, just him popping in to check on me, to chat for a few minutes. But over time, I realized it wasn't just random. He was making it a point to be there. I started to notice it the way he would always show up when I seemed to need him. When I was feeling low or tired, he was there. And in those moments, I welcomed it. It wasn't until later that I realized something wasn't quite right. It wasn't just a friendship anymore. It wasn't casual anymore. It became something more. He was picking me up from work every day, telling me it was for my safety. I was flattered at first. Who wouldn't be? A guy who cared enough to take you home every night, who always seemed to be there when you needed a shoulder to lean on. But looking back, it's hard not to wonder if I ignored the warning signs. The lines between us started to blur, and I was too caught up in it to even notice. I convinced myself it was fine. He was a good guy, right? He made me feel safe and cared for, and after my relationship ended, I thought maybe this was what I needed. A friend who could help fill the void. Then came the night out with a mutual friend. What started as a casual drink turned into more. And by more, I mean the kind of night where everything shifts in an instant. A few drinks led to a few more, and I found myself in Liam's car heading to his flat. I don't know why I let it happen. Maybe I was just looking for a way to escape, feel something other than loneliness. Or maybe it was just easy. With Liam, things always felt easy. He made me laugh. He understood me in a way I hadn't realized I needed. So when the night turned into more than just drinks, I didn't stop it. I didn't question it. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of him talking about us seeing more of each other, spending more time together. It felt like a shift, a change I hadn't been prepared for. I didn't know what to think. Everything was moving so fast. And yet, I didn't pull back. I just went along with it. And that's how it started. We started spending more time together. He picked me up every day, drove me to work, and I started to depend on him more and more. He'd call to check in, ask how my day was, make sure I was okay. It felt comforting at first. It felt nice. But looking back, I can't help but see the control in it. The subtle ways he started to take over my life. He was always there, always watching, always making sure I wasn't alone. Eventually we decided to move in together. It was all so fast, too fast really, but I didn't stop it. His place was too small, and I thought it would be nice to be closer to my family. So we rented a place together just outside my childhood home. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was just rolling with it. It seemed like the natural next step, but soon after tragedy struck. Liam's father passed away unexpectedly. The grief hit him like a wave. He was devastated. I watched him crumble, unable to do anything to ease his pain. In the midst of that grief, he proposed. I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't ready, but I couldn't say no. Not when he was hurting so much. I agreed, asking for a longer engagement, for some space. Some time to figure things out. But the space I thought I needed, it never came. Liam began to change. The man I thought I knew wasn't there anymore. Little things started to bug him, things that hadn't bothered him before. If I spoke to someone on the phone late at night, he'd snap at me. If I went for coffee with a coworker, it would set him off. The worst part? The anger. His anger. It was like a switch flipped inside him. And before I knew it, I started to notice things that made me feel uneasy. Messages deleted from my phone. A strange, tight grip on my wrist when he asked where I'd been. I tried to convince myself it was just grief, but it wasn't. It was more than that. Then came the night I reconnected with Rachel, an old friend I hadn't spoken to in a long time. It was nothing, just a few casual texts, maybe grabbing coffee once in a while. But when Liam found out, it was like everything broke. He exploded, yelling, accusing me of hiding things from him. He didn't even give me a chance to explain. One night, as I was on the phone with Rachel, he stormed into the room, slamming the door so hard I thought it might fall off its hinges. "Who is she?" he demanded, his voice sharp and cold. "Who are you talking to?" I tried to explain. I told him it was nothing, just a friend. But he didn't care. He didn't believe me. And then, in a flash of anger, he shoved me. My back hit the wall hard. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to react. It all happened so fast. The next day he apologized. He begged for forgiveness, and foolishly I accepted. I convinced myself it was a one-time thing. It would never happen again. But when I found out I was pregnant, everything changed. I wasn't ready. I wasn't prepared for what happened next. But when I finally told Liam, his reaction was worse than anything I could have imagined. He yelled. He blamed me. He threw things. He stormed out and didn't come back for days. It was like I was watching someone I didn't know anymore. That was the beginning of the end. Over the following months, Liam's behavior grew more erratic. The accusations, the rage, the constant monitoring, it was all too much. It became suffocating. I tried to leave, tried to escape, but it felt like no matter where I went, he was there. He followed me everywhere. He'd show up at work, wait outside, try to confront anyone who got close to me. It didn't matter where I went, he was there. Eventually I ran away. I stayed with a friend, hoping some distance would help, but it didn't. Liam found me. He tracked me down, brought his friends into it, and continued to harass me. It felt like a nightmare that wouldn't end. I couldn't escape him. Now I'm back at my parents' house, trying to put the pieces back together. But the fear, the anxiety, it doesn't go away. I still get the occasional message from him, but I've blocked him everywhere I can. It's like what was supposed to be the happiest chapter of my life, it turned into something I never thought I'd have to endure. All I want now is peace, for him to finally move on. But I don't know if I'll ever feel safe again. The trauma still lingers, and the memories are there, lurking just beneath the surface. I'm not sure I'll ever be the same person I was before I met him. It's strange how life can change in an instant, sometimes in ways you don't even expect. I always thought of funerals as these quiet, somber affairs, moments where you reflect on life, on the past, on those who've left us behind. I had no idea that the day of old Mrs. Greer's funeral would be the day my life would be completely upended. I had no clue that everything I thought I knew about my town, my family, and even myself, would be shaken to the core. I grew up in a small town, the kind where everybody knows everyone's business. If you did anything out of the ordinary, it didn't take long for the whole town to find out. Secrets were rare, and if you had one, you kept it to yourself because, trust me, someone would sniff it out before long. But there was always that one person, right? The one who seemed to slip through the cracks. The one who nobody could quite figure out. For me, that person was Owen. Owen came from a family that practically ran the town. His family was as old money as it got. Generations of wealth, influence, and connections. They were well respected, admired even. But Owen, he was different. It wasn't like he was a bad person. Not at all. He was the perfect son. Polite, always with a smile on his face. He fit the part. He played it well. But if you really paid attention, there was something just a little off. It wasn't something you could put your finger on right away. It wasn't his actions. No, his actions were always perfect, almost too perfect. It was his presence. He was there, but he wasn't. Like he was always just a little apart from everything and everyone around him. I don't know if it's because I grew up around him or if I was just overly observant, but I always felt like Owen had something hidden away. He had this quiet air about him, like he knew something we didn't, and no one ever seemed to question it. People let it go because who's going to question the perfect son of one of the town's most influential families? Not many people. But there I was, feeling that unease every time I crossed paths with him. It wasn't paranoia. It was just a feeling I couldn't shake. And then came the day of Mrs. Greer's funeral. She had been the last of the founding family still alive, and when she passed away, it was the town's collective duty to pay respects. Everyone was there, every single person who'd ever called this town home. It was like a mandatory pilgrimage, a quiet ceremony that people attended with reverence and tradition. It was supposed to be peaceful, calm, even a little melancholy, but that day, well, it wasn't. I remember walking into the church that afternoon, the air thick with the weight of decades of tradition. The pews were filled with townsfolk, all gathered in their Sunday best, murmuring softly to each other. The scent of lilies hung in the air, mixed with the faintest musty odor of the old wooden floors. It should have been calming, but instead there was this weird, unsettling energy that I couldn't place. It wasn't grief, no, this wasn't the sadness you feel at a funeral. This was something darker, something that didn't belong in the midst of all this respect. And then there was Owen. As usual, he was standing on the outskirts, barely noticeable at first, but I couldn't take my eyes off him. He was just standing there, not participating in the ceremony, not engaged with anyone, but watching the casket with this intense focus, like it held some kind of secret he needed to understand. His face was too pale, his eyes too wide, too hungry. He wasn't mourning Mrs. Greer. No, he wasn't even pretending to be part of the grief. He was waiting. I could feel it. My gut twisted in that familiar way it always did when I was around him. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just the strange atmosphere of the day, the surreal heaviness that hangs over everything during a funeral. But deep down, I couldn't ignore it. There was something about Owen that day. Something in the way he was watching that gave me a sense of dread I couldn't escape. It felt like he knew something none of us did, like he was waiting for something to happen, something that only he could understand. As the ceremony came to a close, the town slowly drifted back into its usual rhythm. People filed out of the church, exchanging murmurs and farewells. The streets became quiet again, save for the occasional car rolling by. But I couldn't shake that feeling. The one that told me something was coming. Something had already started. I couldn't sleep that night, and the more I thought about Owen, the more unsettled I became. There were always rumors about him. Whispers of strange things that happened around him. Things nobody could explain. Things that no one had the guts to ask about. I couldn't stop thinking about them. The rumors that followed him like a shadow. What was Owen hiding? Around midnight, when the whole town had settled into its usual quiet, my phone rang. I didn't even have to look at the caller ID to know who it was, my cousin. He worked at the funeral home, and I knew from the tone of his voice that something was wrong. "You need to get down here," he said, almost frantic. "It's Owen. He's here." I didn't ask questions. I didn't think twice. I just grabbed my jacket, threw on some shoes, and sped off toward the funeral home. The place had always given me the creeps. It was old, falling apart at the seams, with an eerie stillness that made your skin crawl every time you passed it. But tonight, it felt even more alive than usual. It felt wrong. When I arrived, I saw the hearse parked outside, its headlights flickering like the vehicle itself couldn't decide if it was alive or dead. The whole place was dark, save for a faint light spilling from the viewing room. My stomach churned, and my legs felt heavy as I walked toward the door. I pushed it open, and when I stepped inside, it felt like the air itself had shifted. And there he was, Owen, standing by the open casket. But this time, he wasn't just standing there. No, he was reaching inside. His hands were trembling, his fingers shaking as he pulled something out. At first, I thought it was just another body, some form of morbid curiosity. But no, this wasn't a body at all. It was a doll, a child's doll. And not just any doll. This one was ancient, old, battered beyond recognition. Its eyes were cracked, hollow, empty. The doll's clothes were stained with something that looked like dirt, but something darker, something I didn't want to think about. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my voice slicing through the tense silence of the room. My heart was racing, my breath coming in short gasps as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Owen froze. Slowly he turned to face me, and in that moment, I swear I saw a shadow cross his face. His smile wasn't the same as usual. It was twisted, contorted into something that wasn't human. "I had to make sure it was still here," he rasped, his voice low and rough like he was speaking from somewhere deep, deep inside. "She promised me it would be." Before I could react, before I could even think about what was happening, dropped the doll. It hit the floor with a soft thud, and the room seemed to change. The air turned cold. No, cold wasn't the right word. It was freezing. And then something else happened. The walls. Something shifted. I can't explain it. It felt like they were moving, pulsing with something dark, something alive. The casket lid slammed shut, and the lights went out. And that's when I heard it. The scream. But it wasn't a human scream. It wasn't a sound made by anything that belonged in this world. It was wrong. So wrong. It was shrill, sharp, like something that shouldn't be in this world at all. I spun around, my heart racing, but there was no one there. Just Owen, grinning in the dark, like this was all some kind of twisted joke. I tried to run. I couldn't. It was like the floor beneath me had turned to quicksand, dragging me down with every step I tried to take. My heart was pounding in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I felt like I was suffocating, but all I could hear was Owen's laugh, echoing in every corner of the room, bouncing off the walls like it was coming from everywhere at once. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The lights flickered back on. The air grew still. The room felt cold, but the oppressive feeling had lifted. Owen was gone. The casket was closed exactly as it should have been, but the doll, it was still there. At the foot of the casket, its eyes staring at me, empty, watching. I stumbled out of that funeral home, my heart still racing, my hands shaking. I looked back, but the hearse was already driving off into the night, its headlights fading into the darkness. I don't know where it went, and frankly, I didn't care. All I wanted was to get away from that place, from that night, from Owen. Nobody ever saw Owen again after that night. The town carried on. The whispers never stopped, of course. People still talk about him, about the things he was rumored to be involved in. I never asked, though. Some things are better left untouched, right? When I think back to that summer, the one that completely shook me, left me questioning so much. It feels like the whole thing was happening just beneath the surface, barely out of reach. Like something was off, but you couldn't really pinpoint what it was. It's hard to explain, but even years later, I still can't shake that feeling. It was like a weird undercurrent of tension, something no one could really talk about, but everyone could sense. Growing up in that neighborhood, it wasn't like anything you'd see in the movies. It wasn't a close-knit community where everyone was like family, not by a long shot. People knew each other's names, sure, and they knew all the details about who was in trouble, who was keeping secrets, and who was barely holding it together. But despite all the chatter, no one actually seemed to be there for anyone else. Not in the way that really mattered. The neighborhood was rough, gritty, filled with a mix of people who were just trying to survive, and others who were hanging by a thread, trying to hold everything together. But even though the people around me weren't mean-spirited, there was always this weird need to know things. Like, not in a friendly, let me help you kind of way, but in a let me judge you from the outside kind of way. People didn't just mind their own business, they looked for things to gossip about, things to criticize. It wasn't about being helpful or compassionate. It was about knowing things that weren't their business to begin with. It was like a constant undercurrent of judgment that hung in the air, invisible but always there, pulling at you like a weight. I wasn't immune to it. I was just a teenager at the time, trying to figure myself out in a world that felt like it was constantly watching. And it felt like the whole neighborhood already had its opinions about everyone, even if they didn't know the whole story. Everyone had their labels, their assumptions, and there was one person who seemed to bear the weight of it all more than anyone else. Let's call him Chris. Chris was a year ahead of me in school. I didn't know him all that well. He was one of those guys who kept to himself, stayed on the outskirts of everything. You could always tell when someone didn't want to be noticed, and Chris had that vibe. I remember seeing him a few times in town. There was always this weird energy about him, like he was trying to disappear, but he couldn't. His hair was long, unkempt, tangled in a way that made you wonder if he ever bothered to take care of it. He wore hoodies even when it was sweltering outside. He had that look about him, the one where you could tell he wasn't trying to impress anyone. It wasn't a rebellious look either. It was more like a don't look at me, don't ask me questions kind of vibe. People loved to gossip about him. They'd whisper behind his back, making all sorts of assumptions about him. Some said he was drinking too much. Others thought he was into drugs. Some even said he was a thief. But what I heard the most was that Chris had issues, mental health stuff. They'd say like it was just a label they could slap on him and move on. People weren't wrong, I guess. Chris did have his demons, but no one ever really bothered to ask him about them. No one ever really tried to understand. They just labeled him and moved on, like he was some kind of mystery that didn't deserve to be solved. In 2020, I left for university. I was the first person from my neighborhood to go. And I figured that once I was away, everything, the gossip, the stares, the whispers, would fade away. I thought I was escaping it all. But I was so wrong. Distance didn't make it go away. It just made it feel more distant, like I was hearing about it all from far away, as if I was watching someone else's life from behind a screen. And then came that text from my sister. It was a Saturday, and I remember I was sitting in my dorm room, surrounded by the usual mess of papers, textbooks, and random stuff that didn't seem to belong. I wasn't really in the mood for anything, especially not the local neighborhood events that everyone was so obsessed with. They had one of those backyard events. A rugby game, I think. Everyone gathered in someone's backyard, crowded together like sardines in front of a projector screen, drinking, talking, gossiping. It wasn't my thing, but I got the message anyway. My sister wrote, "Something happened to Chris." I don't know, but it's bad. At first I brushed it off. It wasn't unusual for Chris to be the subject of gossip, and I figured maybe he'd gotten himself into some kind of trouble again. But then I got the full story, and it hit me harder than I expected. Apparently, Chris' mom had been at one of those local barbecues. They were all gathering like they did every weekend, talking and laughing as if everything was fine. But when Chris' mom left the barbecue and went home, she noticed something was off. Chris hadn't been answering his door. At first she thought maybe he was just being his usual quiet self. But the more she thought about it, the more she worried. She thought he might hurt himself. It must have felt like everything was happening too fast. But she managed to get his dad on the phone. She was frantic, trying to explain what was going on. And you could feel that panic in every word she said, her voice shaking, telling his dad that Chris was that she couldn't get in, that she was afraid. His dad rushed home, no doubt feeling the same panic. They couldn't get into his room. The door was locked, and I can only imagine what was going through his mind. What did he think was happening in that room? What kind of awful, dark thoughts must have been going through his head in that moment? He must have been imagining the worst, and in that state, he tried to break down the door. I don't know what he thought would happen once he got in there, but I'm sure his heart was racing, pounding against his chest. They were all on edge, but the door wouldn't budge. By the time the neighbors showed up, the whole house was filled with fear and confusion. Everyone was waiting for something terrible to happen, but they never stopped to check the window, the one Chris always used when he wanted to sneak out without anyone noticing. But here's the thing. Chris wasn't even in the house. He'd snuck out to meet some friends, and no one had thought to check the window. It was such a simple thing, yet everyone was caught up in this frantic situation, believing the worst. And for a while, they didn't even think to look for the most obvious answer. While that whole scene was unfolding, something else was happening on the other side of the neighborhood, something I never could have imagined. A 10-year-old boy was left alone with his younger sister. Their parents had gone out for less than an hour. A quick errand. Nothing major. But when they came back, they walked into something I still can't quite wrap my head around. The boy said he spilled juice on his sister, but instead of cleaning her up, he did something much worse. He put her in the microwave. I don't even know how to say it. The words don't feel real. The microwave running, that buzzing hum filling the house, the cold air that must have filled the room when they opened the door. It's something that still haunts me. Did he know what he was doing? Was it out of curiosity, or did he do it because he had been left alone, neglected in ways no one cared to notice? I don't know. What I do know is that if someone had paid attention to the cracks in that family, if someone had looked out for the boy before it got to this point, maybe it wouldn't have happened. The boy wasn't a bad kid. He wasn't some monster, but no one really noticed him. Not in the way that mattered. They were too caught up in their own lives, too wrapped up in the drama surrounding Chris to notice the real danger sitting right under their noses. And that's what bothers me most about it all. Everyone was so focused on Chris's problems, his struggles, that they missed the real issue, the one sitting quietly in the background. After the incident, The boy was sent to a psychiatric center. I don't know what happened to him after that, but I know his family moved away, as if they were trying to escape the aftermath of everything that had happened. I get it. I understand why they left. But I think they also ran from the truth. From the fact that they hadn't seen the warning signs before it was too late. And I can't help but wonder what would have happened if someone had really taken the time to notice Chris, or the boy, or anyone else who was struggling in silence. What if someone had stopped to really look at the signs, to see what was going on underneath? Maybe things would have turned out differently. I don't know, but what I do know is that the whole situation felt like a giant wake-up call. One I couldn't really grasp at the time, but now looking back, it makes me sick to think about how much we missed. Even now, I can still see it all so clearly. The panic in Chris's mom's voice, the silence that followed when everything came crashing down, and the feeling of walking away from it, knowing that some things could have been avoided but weren't. It's one of those memories that sticks with you, that won't ever let you go. And maybe that's the hardest part, knowing that we could have done better but we didn't. That's the kind of thing that stays with you. It's not something you can just shake off no matter how far you run. Growing up, weekends in my family were a time for hiking in the mountains, camping under the stars, and taking in the vast open spaces that always seemed to offer a kind of peace you couldn't find anywhere else. We'd pack up our tents, fill the car with camping gear, and head out to remote spots, leaving behind the noise and bustle of the world. I've got vivid memories of those weekends, the crisp mountain air, the smell of fresh pine, the soft crunch of gravel underfoot as we explored new trails. There was something about being so far from civilization that made me feel connected to the earth, like nothing else mattered but that moment, that place. But as time went on, life changed. I moved to the city for work and found myself caught up in the usual grind. Meetings, deadlines, endless to-do lists. And I barely had time for anything outside of work, let alone for long hikes in the mountains. It wasn't until last spring when I found myself with a long weekend and nothing pressing on my calendar that I finally decided it was time to escape. I needed to get back to the mountains. I needed a break from everything. So I packed up my things, grabbed my hiking boots, and made a plan to hike a secluded trail in a national park somewhere off the beaten path. I was looking for solitude, for that peaceful quiet where I could clear my head. There's something about nature that has always grounded me. Something about it that makes all the noise of life fade into the background. It was a chance to recharge, to be alone with my thoughts, away from the endless hum of the city. I woke up early before the sun had fully risen, eager to start the hike. I made sure to pack everything I'd need. A map, a backpack filled with snacks, a water bottle, and layers of clothing in case the weather turned. I checked in with a friend, just so someone knew where I was going, though I had no intention of checking my phone during the hike. This was about disconnecting, about giving myself the freedom to be off the grid for a while. The morning air was crisp and fresh as I made my way toward the trailhead. The sun was just starting to break through the clouds, casting a soft glow over everything. The weather was perfect, cool, with just enough sunshine and a gentle breeze to keep the temperature comfortable. I felt a sense of calm wash over me as I began to walk, my boots crunching on the dirt path, the sound of birds in the distance, the only other noise in the air. The trail started out gently, with wide open spaces that allowed me to see the surrounding mountains in their full glory. The trees on either side of the trail were tall and sturdy, their branches swaying slightly in the wind. As I walked, I let my mind wander, reflecting on life, work, and everything in between. The farther I went, the more isolated it felt. The hum of civilization slowly faded away until it was just me, the path, and the wilderness. It was exactly what I needed. But the deeper into the forest I went, the more I started to notice subtle changes in the surroundings. The trail grew steeper, the path more rugged, the trees became taller and denser, their branches knitting together above me to form a thick canopy that blocked out the sun. It felt like I was walking through a tunnel of leaves and branches, and the light seemed to dim as the shade thickened. I had always loved hiking, but the solitude here, coupled with the absence of any other hikers, started to feel a little unsettling. I tried to push the feeling aside. It was just me being overly cautious. I was fine. This was the kind of place I'd hoped to find. Quiet, isolated with no distractions. But as the trail narrowed and the silence seemed to deepen, I couldn't help but feel a little on edge. There were fewer trail markers now, and I realized I had strayed off the main path. The idea didn't bother me at first. After all, it wasn't unusual for me to explore a bit off the beaten path. But then I noticed something. The trees around me were blocking out more and more light, and the air felt colder. It wasn't just a drop in temperature either. There was this strange, sour smell that hung in the air, damp, earthy, but with something else that I couldn't place. The scent seemed to cling to my skin, making me feel like something wasn't right. I slowed my pace, trying to reassure myself that it was just my imagination running wild. But the quiet felt different now. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was oppressive. I was used to the sounds of nature. The rustling of leaves, the chirping of birds, the occasional animals scurrying through the underbrush. But now there was nothing, not a single animal sound, just the wind moving through the trees and my own breathing loud in my ears. It felt like I was walking through a forgotten world, like the forest was closing in around me. Still, I pressed on, telling myself that I had come all this way and didn't want to turn back just yet. But the deeper I went, the more uneasy I became. I reached a clearing and thought I had found the end of the trail. It looked like a peaceful spot, a small pond nestled in the center of the clearing, surrounded by trees that looked ancient. The water was still, reflecting the sky like a mirror, and everything seemed so quiet, so perfect. It almost felt too perfect, like the kind of place you might find in a dream. I stood there for a moment, taking it all in, but then I heard it, the rustling in the underbrush. It wasn't the soft, random movements of animals like I'd heard before. This was different. It was deliberate, slow, like something was moving through the bushes, trying to stay hidden. I froze. I couldn't see anything, but the rustling grew louder. I glanced around the clearing, scanning the edge of the trees, but there was nothing. No movement, no animals. The rustling continued, closer now, and my heart started to beat faster in my chest. Something was out there. I wasn't alone anymore. But what was it? A deer? A bear? I didn't know, but it wasn't normal, and I wasn't about to wait around to find out. I turned to leave, but as I did, my foot slipped on a rock and I fell hard against a tree. The wind was knocked out of me, and I lay there, gasping for a moment, trying to gather myself. When I stood up, I felt a sharp pain in my ankle. It was sore, but not enough to stop me. I tried to grab my phone to call for help, just to let someone know where I was. But when I looked at the screen, it was cracked. No signal. Panic hit me hard. How far had I walked off trail? How long would it take for someone to realize I was missing? The thought of being stuck here, unable to get help, made my stomach turn. I forced myself to calm down, took a deep breath and started retracing my steps. But then that rustling started again, and this time it was behind me. My heart pounded as I spun around, but there was nothing there, just trees, just shadows. But the rustling continued getting closer with every step I took. I felt like something was following me. My mind raced trying to come up with a logical explanation, but nothing made sense. The sound of footsteps, the way it followed me. I quickened my pace, my legs aching, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I rounded a bend, and that's when I saw it. A figure, crouched low in the shadows at the edge of the trees. At first I thought it was just another hiker, but as my eyes adjusted I realized that this figure wasn't wearing hiking gear. It wasn't even dressed like someone who had been out here for a few hours. The clothes were ragged, dirty, and torn. It looked like it had been living in the woods for days, maybe even weeks. My blood ran cold, and my feet felt like they were glued to the ground. The figure stood up slowly, its eyes glinting in the low light, and for a moment it just stared at me. I could feel my pulse racing, my body frozen in place, unable to move. It didn't say a word, didn't make a sound. It just watched me like it was waiting for something. I don't know how long we stood there staring at each other, but eventually the figure turned and disappeared into the trees without a word. I didn't wait to see where it went. I didn't need to. I turned and ran. The pain in my ankle was nothing compared to the panic surging through my veins. I pushed myself harder, faster, ignoring the fear and the pain as I ran back the way I came. But now, the rustling wasn't just behind me. It was all around me. Footsteps, quick and heavy, following my every move. I ran until I reached the edge of the trail, out of breath and drenched in sweat, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. When I finally made it back to the parking lot, I didn't stop to catch my breath. I didn't even look back. I just got in my car, slammed the door, and drove straight back to town, my hands shaking on the wheel. It wasn't until later that I learned about the disappearances. People who had gone off trail and never returned. Hikers who'd ventured too far into the park and no one had ever found any trace of them. Authorities called it bad luck, wild animals, or just the dangers of the wilderness. But now I don't think it was animals. Whatever I saw in that park, it wasn't human. And if I'd stayed out there any longer, I don't think I would have made it out at all. I had never been to an amusement park before. I guess you could say I had this image in my head of what it would be like. The bright lights, the buzzing energy, the constant sounds of laughter filling the air, and the irresistible smell of buttery popcorn and sugary treats. It was all so vibrant, so alive. It seemed like the perfect escape from the monotony of everyday life. My parents, deciding it was time for a little fun, took me and my younger brother to the park on a Saturday afternoon. We'd only recently moved to the city, and my parents thought it would be a nice way for us to make some new memories. It sounded like the perfect plan, and at that time, I was sure it would be the highlight of our move. Little did I know that day would turn into something far darker and more unsettling than I could ever have imagined. The day began as you might expect. We parked the car, grabbed our tickets, and walked through the grand wrought iron gates, which felt more like an entrance to a magical world than a theme park. The sheer size of the park was enough to make my head spin. Everywhere I looked, there were families laughing and playing, kids running around with cotton candy in hand, and carnival game booths beckoning with the promise of prizes. My excitement was building by the second, and I couldn't wait to see all the rides. I think my heart might have skipped a beat when I first spotted the roller coasters. Their steel tracks cutting through the sky, twisting and turning, with riders screaming in exhilaration. The adrenaline in my chest was palpable, and I just couldn't wait to be a part of it. Everything around me was buzzing with this infectious energy. It felt like life was pulsing through the very ground beneath my feet. The park was alive, and I was right there in the middle of. But as the afternoon wore on, things started to feel different. There was this subtle shift in the air, this growing sense of tension that I couldn't shake. The sky, which had been so clear when we arrived, suddenly turned this dull, murky gray. I noticed the change in the temperature, too. It was as if someone had flipped a switch. The warm sunshine that had bathed the park was gone, replaced by this eerie chill that crept up my spine. A gust of wind kicked up, and I heard the Ferris wheel creaking, its metal joints straining against the pressure. At first, I didn't think much of it. After all, summer storms were common, and I figured it was just one of those things that would pass. But then I started to notice how people around me were reacting. I remember looking at a family nearby. They'd been laughing just moments before, but now they were all looking up at the sky, their faces tight with worry. They pulled their kids in closer, as if instinctively protecting them from something they couldn't quite name. It wasn't just the wind, it was this collective sense of unease that seemed to spread through the park like wildfire. People were glancing nervously at the sky, then at each other, silently asking what's happening. As we were waiting in line for one of the roller coasters, the park's loudspeaker crackled to life, breaking the uneasy quiet. The voice that came through was unexpectedly serious, almost too formal for a place that usually thrived on lightheartedness. "Attention guests," the voice said sharp and clear. "The rides will be temporarily paused due to weather concerns. Please make your way to the nearest shelter. Thank you for your cooperation." That was when the knot in my stomach really tightened. Something about the voice sounded off. I don't know how to explain it. It was just too calm, like they were trying to keep us from panicking, but the urgency in their tone was unmistakable. My parents, ever the calm ones, tried to reassure my brother and me, but I could see the unease in their eyes. We weren't in full-blown panic mode yet, but I could feel it in the air. The park was shifting from a place of excitement to one of tension. People were scattering, hurrying towards shelter. Some trying to get to the exits, others just seeking a place to hide from whatever storm was coming. We made our way toward a large covered area near one of the game booths. The wind had turned savage by now, howling through the park like an animal in a frenzy. The temperature had dropped drastically, and I could feel it in my bones, this unnatural cold that seemed to creep in from all sides. We weren't fully panicked, not yet, but the atmosphere had changed completely. The park, which had once been bright and fun, now felt dark and foreboding. It wasn't just the storm. It was this quiet, palpable fear that had started to settle over everyone. It was like the park itself was waiting for something, too. And then it happened. A loud crash shattered the eerie calm, coming from the direction of the roller coaster. It was the kind of noise that made you freeze. My heart stopped for a moment. It was followed by a sharp, unnerving silence before a chorus of screams erupted from the direction of the rides. They weren't screams of joy like you hear on a roller coaster. These screams were raw, panicked, and filled with terror. I couldn't see what had caused it, but the sound of terror was unmistakable. And then the crowd went wild. People were pushing, shoving, running in all directions as panic set in. It felt like the world had gone upside down. My parents grabbed my brother and me and yanked us through the throngs of people, trying to get us away from the chaos. But it felt like the crowd was closing in on us from every side, the sea of bodies pushing us forward in a panicked rush. We weren't moving fast enough. The entire atmosphere shifted in that moment. The lights above flickered, casting long, dark shadows across the park, stretching unnaturally like some kind of dark omen. The once familiar sounds of the park. The laughter, the music, the clattering of carnival games had disappeared completely, replaced by the howling wind and the distant sounds of people shouting. The rides were swaying, creaking and groaning in ways that didn't seem natural. It was like the park had come to life, twisting and shifting like it was alive, like it was angry. The Ferris wheel, which had been a calming sight earlier, was now jerking violently in the wind, creaking with each movement, like it was struggling to stay upright. We tried to keep moving, but every step felt heavier. The path toward the exit felt impossibly far. And the closer we got to it, the more I felt like the park was closing in on us, its lights flickering as though they were trying to hold us there, as though they were trying to trap us. It felt like the park had become a maze of shadows and distorted sounds, and we were just trying to escape before it swallowed us whole. Just as we were nearing the exit, I heard the scream. It was a sound so high-pitched and shrill that it sent a wave of ice-cold fear through me. It came from the direction of the haunted house, and it was so visceral, so raw, that I couldn't breathe for a second. There was no mistaking it. It was the scream of someone in mortal danger. And then came a crash, glass shattering, wood splintering, a sound so violent and sharp that it felt like it was coming from inside my chest. People around us froze in place, eyes wide with fear, while others ran in the opposite direction. Some were frozen in terror, unable to move, while others were sprinting, desperate to get as far away from the screams as possible. It felt like the world around us was breaking apart. "Mom, Dad!" I screamed, my voice barely above the roar of the wind. My brother and I clung to our parents, but even then, it didn't feel like enough. We were running, but it didn't feel like we were making any progress. The lights, the screams, the terrifying sounds, it all felt like it was closing in on us, like the park was suffocating us. When we finally reached the parking lot, I turned around desperate to see the park behind us. But what I saw still haunts me to this day. The amusement park, once so lively and bright, now looked like a twisted, nightmarish version of itself. The lights were blinking in an erratic pattern, casting long, jagged shadows across the deserted grounds. Some of the rides, which should have been still, were still moving, jerking unnaturally, as if they had a mind of their own. The Ferris wheel was spinning in a way that was nothing like the calm, steady motion it had earlier. It was as if it was mocking us, spinning wildly as if daring us to come back. It was an image I couldn't shake, a vision that kept flashing in my mind long after we had left. We didn't fully understand the magnitude of what had happened until we heard the news later on. The roller coaster had malfunctioned, and 2 of its cars had flown off the tracks, injuring several people. The haunted house had caught fire after an explosion, and several other rides had been severely damaged. The chaos, we later found out, had been caused by a freak tornado that had touched down nearby, tearing through the park with no warning. But even with that explanation, I couldn't shake the feeling that something more had been at play. It wasn't just the storm that caused the destruction. There was something unnatural about that place. Something wrong. It was as though the park itself had been calling to us, luring us in only to turn on us when we least expected it. I haven't been back to an amusement park since that day, and I don't think I ever will. The sound of a roller coaster in the distance still makes my heart race, my palms sweat, and those blinking lights, the ones that haunted me that day, still appear in my dreams, flickering as though they're calling me back. And every time I wake up with a feeling of dread that I can't shake. I don't think I'll ever be able to forget that day or that park. I don't really know why I agreed to meet up with Carl again. It's been years since we last spoke, and when I heard he was back in town, I figured it might be good to catch up. But if I'm being honest with myself, I wasn't just interested in reconnecting. Carl and his family had left so abruptly all those years ago, and I couldn't help but wonder why. The whole thing had been strange, and I never really got the full story. No one did. It just seemed like they vanished overnight, without so much as a goodbye. No warning, no explanation. So when Carl called me up, inviting me over, it felt like an opportunity one couldn't pass up. It was my chance to finally get to the bottom of it. What had really happened? Why did they leave? And more importantly, what was Carl hiding? We met in his old backyard, the same place where we spent so many afternoons making memories we'd probably never remember correctly. The same worn-out swings, the overgrown patch of grass, and the old oak tree in the corner that still stood strong. But Carl, he wasn't the same. He looked older, tired really. There was something about him that felt different. His eyes were heavy, like they carried a lot of weight, and he wasn't the carefree guy I remembered. It wasn't just age. It was like he had gone through something that had changed him permanently. I could feel the tension in the air between us, like we were both trying to figure out what to say, but neither of us was ready to dive into the deep stuff yet. I tried making small talk, asking about work, his life, the usual stuff, but it wasn't long before the awkward silence between us was just too much to ignore. I couldn't help myself. The questions that had been eating away at me for years bubbled up to the surface. Carl, seriously, why did you guys leave so suddenly? It was like one day you were here, and then the next you were just gone. No goodbyes, no warning. What happened? Carl hesitated for what felt like forever. Like he was weighing whether or not he should even tell me the truth. Finally, he looked up at me, and there was this darkness in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. He took a slow breath, his voice low and barely audible when he finally spoke. There was this man, a strange man with a weird smile. He started stalking us. At first, I thought I misheard him. What? Carl nodded, his gaze not leaving mine. Yeah, man. He'd show up outside our house every night, just stand there with this grin on his face. A weird, creepy smile. He never said a word. He just stood there watching. And at first, we thought he was just some random guy passing through, you know. Maybe he was lost. But then he kept coming back every night, and he wouldn't leave. No matter how many times we tried to chase him off, he just kept showing up. I didn't know how to respond. It didn't make any sense. A man standing outside their house every night, just grinning at them like some sort of monster from a nightmare. Wait, are you telling me this guy just stood outside your house staring at you with a creepy smile every night? Carl nodded again, his voice getting quieter. Yeah, and it wasn't just standing outside. He started getting closer. He'd stand by the window sometimes, just staring at us through the glass, grinning like he knew something we didn't. It was like he was enjoying it, enjoying the fear he was causing. And the weirdest part, he never spoke, never made a sound, just that damn smile. I felt my skin crawl. That's not something you just forget. That's not something you could shake off. So what did you do? Did you call the cops? Carl looked down at his hands, twisting his fingers in his lap. We did, a couple of times, but he was always gone by the time they showed up. The cops couldn't find him. They'd just tell us to lock up, keep the lights on, and try not to freak out. But it kept happening. Night after night, he would show up. It felt like he was always watching, always waiting for us to do something. The more Carl spoke, the worse it got. This wasn't just some random creep. This guy was methodical, like he was studying them, learning their routine, watching their every move. Didn't the cops do anything? Did they even try to catch him? Carl let out a long breath, the frustration clear in his voice. They tried, but he was always one step ahead. We couldn't figure out how he kept getting in so close, or how he was always there right when we least expected it. The scariest part? It wasn't just at night anymore. He started showing up during the day too. Sometimes he'd be standing at the end of the driveway, just staring at the house. Other times he'd be across the street, just out of sight, waiting. But we knew he was there watching. I shook my head in disbelief. So what did you do after that? How did it end? Carl's face darkened. It didn't end. It kept getting worse. Every day we'd come home, and he'd be there, grinning. No matter where we went, he was always there, lurking in the background. It started to feel like we were being hunted, and the more we tried to ignore it, the worse it got. It was like he was in our heads, messing with us. My mom was scared to even leave the house. She wouldn't go out for groceries without my dad by her side. I couldn't imagine the fear they must have been feeling. A strange man with a sickening smile lurking around their house, taunting them. What could you do against that? But your dad? He didn't just let it go, did he? Carl's eyes flashed with a mix of anger and fear. No, my dad was done being scared. One night, he decided to confront the guy. He grabbed a flashlight and his gun and went outside, determined to put an end to it. He thought maybe if he confronted him, maybe the guy would finally leave us alone. I held my breath, waiting for Carl to continue. What happened? Did he get the guy to leave? Carl shook his head slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. No. The guy was already standing right on the porch when my dad went outside. Right there, grinning at him like he was waiting. My dad tried to get him to move, tried to threaten him, but the guy didn't flinch. He just stood there, smiling wider, like he was daring my dad to make the next move. I felt my pulse quicken, my skin prickling. "What did your dad do?" Carl's voice grew quieter, like the memory was something he couldn't shake. He tried to push the guy back, but when he got closer, the man didn't move. He just stood there, smiling like he was taunting my dad. So my dad, he shot at him. He didn't aim to hit him, but he shot into the air, hoping it would make the guy run off. But it didn't. The man didn't move. He just turned and walked away, still grinning. That's when we knew it wasn't just some random guy. This wasn't normal. This was something else. I was horrified. And after that, did it stop? Carl sighed, looking exhausted. No, it didn't stop. In fact, it got worse. The man started showing up in the middle of the day. He was always there, always waiting. It felt like we couldn't escape him, like he was always lurking in the background, watching. We couldn't take it anymore. My mom and dad were losing it. We didn't feel safe in our own home anymore. So one night we just packed up everything and left. No goodbyes, no warnings. We left in the middle of the night without telling anyone. I stared at Carl, struggling to process what he was saying. "You just left. You ran." Carl nodded. "Yeah, we couldn't stay. The cops couldn't help. There was nothing anyone could do. We just left." I let the silence hang for a moment, trying to wrap my mind around it. This wasn't just a weird guy being creepy. This was a man who had stalked Carl's family, mentally tortured them, and chased them out of their home. It wasn't just the physical presence of the man that haunted them. It was the psychological terror, the constant feeling of being watched, that smile. It was like the man was trying to get inside their heads, trying to break them. I felt a chill run down my spine. "So have you seen him again? Has he followed you here?" Carl met my eyes, his face pale and serious. "I haven't seen him since we moved. But I know he's out there watching. Don't know where or when, but I know he's still there. And if he's still watching us, I'm not sticking around to find out what he wants." The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as I processed his words. That smile, the weird, unsettling grin, that man was still out there somewhere. And as I left Carl's house that day, I couldn't shake the feeling that Carl wasn't the only one. It started the way most strange things do, so gradually that I didn't even realize something was wrong until it was too late. Looking back, I wish I had paid closer attention to all the little moments, all the subtle signs that something wasn't quite right. But at the time, Kevin was just there, a quiet, helpful presence in the office, and I had no reason to think twice about him. Kevin was the new hire in our department, brought in to help with administrative work when the workload got too heavy. He was polite, unassuming, the type of person you could easily overlook in a crowded room. He wasn't shy exactly, but he wasn't outgoing either. He existed in that strange middle ground, always present, always available, but never drawing too much attention to himself. If you needed a hand with something, Kevin was already there. If you forgot your coffee at your desk, Kevin had noticed and set it aside for you before you even realized it. At first, everyone liked him. It was hard not to like him. To be honest, I barely paid him any mind in the beginning. My workload was overwhelming, and I didn't have the energy to focus on much beyond my growing to-do list. Kevin's presence didn't really make much of a difference to me one way or another. He was just part of the office background, shuffling papers, fixing jammed printers, running small errands. If anything, he was a relief, a non-issue. But in hindsight, I should have questioned it. I should have asked myself how someone could be so present, yet so completely unmemorable at the same time. I only started to notice him more when he began inserting himself into my day in ways that were impossible to ignore. At first, it was just small things, a casual comment in the break room about how I liked my coffee, even though I had never told him. A perfectly timed text at odd hours. Just a meme. Nothing inappropriate, but always enough to remind me that he was still there. An offer to run an errand for me. Phrased so naturally that saying no would have felt unnecessarily rude. He was helpful. Too helpful. And something about it didn't sit right with me. But I ignored that uneasy feeling. Because what kind of person gets creeped out by kindness? Then the offers escalated. "Need help carrying that to your car? I could grab lunch for you. You're always so busy." I was heading that way anyway. "I can drop it off for you." At first I told myself I was overreacting, that I was imagining things. But then I started saying no. I became more conscious of how often he was hovering near me, how he always seemed to be aware of what I needed before I even said it. But then came the day I made the mistake of saying yes. I had a box of documents that needed to be delivered to a branch office across town, and I simply didn't have time to drive there myself. As expected, Kevin immediately offered. I hesitated, but I was exhausted and his offer was too convenient to pass up. Sure, I said thanks. And that was when it happened, he smiled. But it wasn't just a polite, helpful smile. It was something else. Like I had just given him something valuable. Like this moment had meant something to him. An hour later, he texted me, "Actually, I have my car. Want to just come with me? It'll be faster." I didn't want to go, but what excuse did I have to say no? He was helping me after all. Saying no would have made me look rude, ungrateful. So I got in the car. At first, everything seemed normal. The usual office small talk, traffic complaints, the weather. But then I noticed something. The route we were taking wasn't the right one. "Hey, this isn't the way to the branch," I said, trying to keep my voice light, casual. Kevin barely glanced at me. "It's a shortcut." My stomach twisted. The streets grew quieter, more desolate, shifting from office buildings to abandoned lots. I checked my phone, low battery. My mind raced, searching for a reason to make him turn around. I forced a laugh. "I don't think this is actually faster. We should just take the main road." Kevin didn't argue. He didn't even seem annoyed. He just smiled and turned the car around, like the detour had been insignificant. But something in the air had changed. It was like he had tested something, and I had failed. The moment we reached the branch office, I got out of the car so fast I barely remembered grabbing the documents. My heart was pounding, but I still managed to force out a "thanks for the ride." That night, Kevin texted me. Nothing out of the ordinary, just a meme. Just enough to remind me that he was still there. After that, I avoided him. I made sure to never be alone with him, never accept another favor. But Kevin didn't stop. Every weekend, a text. Every few days, a perfectly casual comment that let me know he had been paying attention to my life. "See, you weren't at your desk today. Hope you're not sick. Saw your post about that restaurant. Looks good. Need anything from the supply room?" Always harmless. Always just enough to make it impossible for me to say, "Leave me alone," without seeming paranoid. And then one Monday morning, the office was buzzing. Something had happened. Whispers. Stiff faces. A news report had surfaced. A body had been found in an abandoned lot near the road Kevin had taken me down that day. A missing woman. I stared at the article, my hands cold and clammy. I didn't know her, but my mind was screaming. My pulse pounding in my ears. I replayed every interaction with Kevin, every moment that had felt slightly off. By the afternoon, he was gone. His desk was cleared out. No 2 weeks' notice, no explanation, just vanished. No one knew where he went. I never heard from him again. To this day, I don't know what his intentions were that day in the car. I don't know if he was just trying to scare me. If he was testing how far he could push. I don't know if he was involved in what happened to that woman. But I do know one thing. If something feels wrong, if something in your gut is screaming at you to run, listen to it.